This?
Can you imagine that? You just shared the story and the guy just giving you the candy immediately.
I was just saying that Moldova has like crazy candy and he pulls out like candy from his...
That made my day.
Welcome to the good life.
Like we always do at this time, I go for mine, I got to shine.
Now throw your hands up in the sky.
I go for mine, I got to shine.
Now throw your hands up in the sky.
Okay, champs, today we're gonna talk with Kari Chern, who just wrapped up his assignment as a head of TA at Autodoc, and he's about to embark to the new journey. I'm super excited to talk to the person because he is the one who went from the software development to head of TA role, yeah? Which is super exciting.
Hi, my name's Curry. I'm, most recently head of talent acquisition at Autodoc. I'm an engineer by training, so I studied chemical engineering and applied math. And I think I just bring a sort of engineering mindset to people problems.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, of
So
course.
we are already live. And I guess first things first, who are you, man, outside the LinkedIn?
I don't know. That's a very difficult question actually to answer. But I think, I don't know. I'm just someone who's very curious, and I'm also very open. So I like to explore different opportunities, learn new things. So I guess that's probably the through line.
Okay.
Yeah, of myself.
And how you ended up in the beautiful city of Amsterdam?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I actually started with a backpacking trip. I took a year off in 2023.
Yeah.
No, 2013, sorry. So I graduated from university. I had studied chemical engineering and applied math. Mm-hmm. And then I worked in finance in Boston to pretty much pay down my student loans. And then after I paid down my loans, I was like, okay, great, but what do I actually want to do? Mm-hmm. I honestly didn't know at that time. I had always wanted to travel. I'd always wanted to come to Europe, and I was like, oh, well, now I actually have the money to at least do a trip. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go for it. So I spent 6 months actually backpacking through Europe, mm-hmm. and then another 6 months in Asia. Mm-hmm. And then during this time, I met someone in Barcelona who would later actually run an exec search company based in London, mm-hmm. And Amsterdam. And in 2017, we sort of caught up. And then he's like, hey, I'm actually looking for someone to help us run product. And then that's sort of how I ended up in Amsterdam.
And you are here for how long already?
Since 2017, so...
2017?
Yeah, so 9 years now.
Okay, 9 years.
Yeah.
That's actually a solid period of time.
Yeah, considering how transient Amsterdam is, yeah, I think that's...
And what are the next plans? Are you still here in Amsterdam? You want to travel somewhere, or you're picking up for a new assignment very soon?
Yeah, well, I'm moving with my partner to Madrid, and and then I guess we'll figure out what comes next.
Why Madrid?
Why Madrid? The weather, the food, but also my partner's family, her family's in Madrid, and we just also want to be closer to family, mm-hmm. as well.
But 9 years in Amsterdam, don't you have the feeling that you're attached somehow to this city, to the country?
I think I do, but also part of it is like my own family is very dispersed. So my sister lives in Seattle, my parents, they live in Washington, D.C. I was also raised by my grandmother who lives in Taipei. Mm-hmm. So I try to visit them as much as I can.
Yeah.
But then obviously with Amsterdam as a base, me needing to travel there, and then also my girlfriend needing to travel to Spain, it's just a bit of a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, but that's quite a diversity, and I think that's what makes you quite interesting character, Kari. because it's not only diverse in terms of the geography you covered so far, but it also diverse in terms of the roles you covered. And you started as a research analyst in Boston.
I studied as a actually software developer in Boston.
That was the beginning.
Yeah, that was the
But
beginning.
at some point you also did the research thingy.
Yes, that was in university. So I
Okay,
was
back in the days.
back in university. I was an intern at a
Yeah.
clinical trials lab. So I was a research assistant there
Yeah.
and also a programmer.
And then you moved to as a software developer. That was the beginning.
Yeah.
And until the last point, you were actually doing that. And
Yeah.
just before.
Just before that, so after my year-long trip, I actually moved back to the U.S. I moved down to Austin, and I joined a quantum dot startup. So I was a process engineer there.
Yeah.
And then that sort of combined my chemical engineering background, but also software engineering because I was writing a lot of control software there.
Okay.
But that also got me thinking about recruitment, funnily enough, because we were a small company in the middle of San Marcos, Texas, small town. And it was really hard to find talent, obviously, for a 15-person startup there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it the only thing which triggered you actually to start doing some recruitment for the company?
No, I mean, I think, well, so the funny thing was actually how I got recruited into the company.
Okay.
So I was in a coffee shop in Austin called like Brew and Brew, and it was an open space, sort of like this. And what happened was I was actually interviewing for a different company.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing for a property tech company as a software engineer, and then Matt, who later became my boss, I guess he was just sitting in the cafe, and then he heard, it's like, okay, hey, this guy studied chemical engineering. So he was just sort of like overhearing my whole
Okay.
interview. And then after the interview was done, you know, I obviously shook my interviewer's hand and blah, blah. And then Matt came up to me and then he was like, by the way, sorry, it's like, this might seem weird, but I overheard your whole interview.
So you were interviewing by two companies at the same time?
Yeah, and then he was like, I think you're great for our company. And then he's like, if you don't mind, it's like, maybe I can tell you a bit more about what we're doing. And then I was like, yeah, sure. I still have 30 minutes or so. And we had a coffee. And then the next day he's like, hey, if you want to see the lab, like, why don't you come with us down to San Marcos? And then I carpooled with him. And yeah, that was the beginning of that.
Oh man, that's so funny. How it's even possible for the person who is so into the engineering to end up in the recruitment?
Yeah, I think also part of it was just more I was seeing what my friends were sort of going through. I graduated in 2013 from university, and I sort of made this switch to recruitment in 2017. So, you know, like 4 or 5 years out of university. And what I noticed was a bunch of my friends, they had all studied different disciplines, you know, like chemical engineering, physics, chemistry, biology, you know, mechanical engineering, industrial engineering, various disciplines. But almost everyone actually ended up in computer science because that's where all the good jobs were, that's where all the money was. And I could sense also talking to some of my friends that there was a bit of a mismatch, you know, like they might have ended up in this career, but it wasn't necessarily because they chose the career. It was just more like that was where I guess the market demand was at the moment. And I had a friend who was actually working at, back then Facebook, now Meta. And he was working on, he was actually working on algorithms, you know, to feed content. And I think he was actually starting to think about sort of the things that we see now with social media and, you know, what's on the news with like, you know, social media addiction and things like that. And he had trained as a physicist. So he had a physics degree from Harvard and he became, an engineer at Meta, at Facebook. And I think he was also just sort of thinking, it's like, hey, is this actually what I want to be doing with my career, right? So we were all having these conversations. And I think it also made me think that actually there's this mismatch, right? There's this inefficiency in the talent market. Yeah, it'd be an interesting problem to try to solve or at least try to improve, right?
I love the mismatch angle.
Yeah.
And I think it's happening a lot now.
Yeah. I think actually, I think there are benefits of AI, but I also feel like actually, if you see the problems that also this is causing, I also see the negatives as well.
You've been in the both sides, yeah? Mm-hmm. So you were working as a software developer, so you've been hired before. And then you moved to the side of the recruitment, and as a head of TA, obviously you were hiring yourself. What do you think that usually the head of TAs fundamentally miss in the process when it comes to technical hires?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is actually like domain knowledge, right? I think sometimes when a hiring manager comes and then they're like, oh, I want someone who knows these specific languages, it also depends on the role, right? So in certain roles, it's like that's actually very important, but in other contexts, it's actually not that important, right? Because if you know a particular programming language, it's like maybe it is actually easily transferable to actually pick up a different programming language, right? It depends, but it's like if I've written in like one object-oriented programming language, then picking up another one is just a matter of syntax, right? So it's like, oh, instead of, writing .print for a print function, it's like maybe I need to put print and then put it in parentheses, but that's something that a software engineer can actually easily pick up. So I think sometimes it's like this nuance, right, about like how transferable are actually the skills, because I think sometimes people think, because you hear about it as like a programming language, right? So then you sort of think about it as like similar to like a spoken language, maybe, if you're not technical. And then sometimes it's like, oh, well, I can't understand someone who's speaking Swahili. So so if the hiring manager is saying it's like they need to know, I don't know, C#, and this person only has C++, it's like, maybe they don't know if actually the skill is transferable or not, right? So I think that's maybe one of the most common mistakes that I see, when it comes to technical hiring. Mm-hmm.
And how you changed the approach in the last company when it comes to the interview stages and filtering?
Yeah, I think part of it is also, I think very systematically, also maybe the pressure that we get from hiring managers is people always want this like unicorn candidate that they've sort of made up in their heads, right? So they're like, hey, I want this person to have had done this job before, right? To know all of the frameworks that we're using, to know all of the languages that we're using. And I guess the question is also, I think also very important in our times is actually how adaptable is a person and how their skills actually translate, right? Because for instance, I actually don't know if you want to hire someone who's had a decade of experience in product management and thinks about product management in a very traditional way, when actually now you can like develop prototypes with much less resources, much faster, right? So it's like the whole environment has sort of shifted. And if we're still hiring the way we've always hired, I just feel like we're actually like, it's like there's a mismatch then in terms of the kinds of profiles that we're hiring. So I think part of it is actually, instead of being stuck so close to, hey, I was provided these requirements by a hiring manager, trying to actually understand what the actual problem is that the hiring manager is trying to solve, and actually being a bit more creative about it. Because also, very honestly, I don't want to do the same exact role in my next job that I've been doing before. I think most people feel the same, right? It's like if you... and it depends, right? Some roles, it's like some people are comfortable with, and and it's fine. It's like they want to continue doing the same thing. But I think a lot of people, it's like they don't want to be doing the exact same thing for the next 40 years of their life. And so I feel like, it's also funny how sometimes it's like we're trying to search for people who are like, okay, they did exactly this like 10 years ago, and we expect them to, for the past 10 years, and we expect them to want to do the exact same thing today, you know.
Amazing. And I think, if I may, I have two follow-up questions on that. Because one thing you said that you not necessarily want to do the same thing which you did now, which makes me curious, okay, what would be the next role for you then?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question. I'm still actually exploring this a bit myself. I think I am looking at something maybe with a broader scope. So I went from a fairly small company. You know, we had 50 to 200 some employees at various times to a much larger company, so around 6,000 employees. And I don't know, I feel like I liked sort of the broader scope in an earlier stage startup, you know. Yeah, so I think maybe that's where currently I'm leaning towards, but yeah, I'm also, yeah, I guess it's like I'm still very honestly exploring all of this, yeah.
So we might say like it's a Series A, Series B, and then you might be responsible for all the functions, not only the recruitment.
Yeah,
that
maybe
might be
more general, like more people
agenda
leader, or yeah, or operations. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. And the second question, which comes from the previous answers of yours, you said that not necessarily people want to do the same all the time, right? And I think this is how the algorithms work. So we want to hire this founding engineer. We are searching for founding engineers. But that's only one example. But how to make this match happen to get the right person who is maybe not on the same title, like, and how to make it at scale.
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult thing, and then that's also what I think TA functions are struggling with at this moment, right? So I guess on the candidate side, with AI, it's like it's now easier than ever to apply, and we're actually seeing this. You know, it's like maybe before our applications would have like, you know, 100 applications. It's like now we're seeing, you know, 300, sometimes even 700 applications for a particular role. And then imagine the recruiters, you know, that have to now sift through all this information in order to actually find people, right? From a candidate perspective, it's also easier. Like maybe before, if I'm a junior software engineer and I want to present myself as more senior, I would actually probably need to talk to a more senior software engineer to be like, hey, can you review my resume? Yeah. You know, how can I adapt it? Blah, blah, blah. Now it's like you just put it on ChatGPT. Yeah. And then, you know, and then you have a fully written resume. And then now that's just noise, right? That a recruiter needs to be able to screen out to actually understand, okay, does this person actually know the subject or not? Or did they just use ChatGPT? And then it's like they have a very nice, nicely formed resume, but actually they don't have the requisite skills for the role, right? So I feel like there's also a lot more noise that we have to contend with, and I'm seeing this actually because also in the TA groups that I'm in, I've also, I think, ironically, I think it's like some people are like, oh, it's like you know, having all these AI agents, it's like this will be the end of sourcing, right? Because you just have all the candidates, you put them through a funnel, it's like the algorithm will just be like, boom, these are the 10 people you should hire. But actually what I'm seeing now is actually there's a lot of requests, actually, people trying to find sourcers, because I think what's happening is maybe before, for a lot of roles, it's like the applications were good enough quality that you could just hire from the applicant pool. But now there's so much noise that businesses are like, oh, wait, actually, the noise to signal ratio is off. So now we need to actually fall back on sourcing, right? And so I also actually ironically see like a very high demand for senior sourcers, right? Yeah.
I love that part, that the noise is actually getting more and more, and the people needs to first of all somehow filter the noise, but again rely back on the sourcing, even though they have 700 candidates applied. Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back maybe a bit on this side as well. Typically, what you would expect from the recruiter or let's say head of TA, yeah, that they're not necessarily technical people. So which means that when it comes to technology, some kind of AI tooling and etc., they would be quite critical, like, okay, maybe this is not a good thing for me. But when it comes to you, I believe, and I assume that you deployed a couple of helpful agents here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on the context, right? So, I mean, certain things are, I think in terms of creating I think it's just sort of the problem scope. So I guess internally in our teams, it's like there are some easy things which are like, okay, how do we make our job descriptions and job ads more accessible, right? And part of it was, we're operating in multiple geographies, and then, something that AI is good at is like doing translation, right? So we could then translate it, have someone, who actually is a native speaker of the language review it, and then that way, we can create a job ad in a target language much quicker. I think the end-to-end solutions are, I think it's like well, maybe not with Avery. I guess you guys are trying to solve this problem, but I think it's like right now it's like I think the fidelity of that's still being scoped, right? Like so. I think in terms of internally, in terms of like, okay, how do we run processes and how do we run workflows? We've been able to create, like gems and stuff that sort of run this. So we can have like standardized job descriptions. We can make sure that, okay, things are in a gender neutral tone and things like that. And I think that's something that the AI tooling is really helping us with.
Correct. Most of the TA teams, they talk about the data, they want to make a data-driven decisions when it comes to the hiring, but still somehow they ended up in the gut feeling, the hunch. But you, as someone who's coming actually from the data-driven world first, how do you tackle this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times what you see in processes is just sort of lack of standardization in the beginning, even like so. We just receive sort of actually not even a hiring mandate. It's usually just a hiring manager comes in and it's like, hey, someone left, and now we need to fill this vacancy, right? And then the recruiter typically then just, starts on the role and they start executing, right? And I think, what TA organizations need to do is they need to standardize the process a bit more, right? So I think what's especially important is actually aligning having a proper intake call with actually all the hiring stakeholders, right? And really aligning on like what exactly are we looking for, and what's the problem to be solved, right? So, and then from that, it's like hopefully the recruiter can then, dissect that into more layers. Like, okay, so what are the tasks that need to be done? It's like, what kind of skills does this person actually need to do? Which skills will they actually develop on the job versus which skills do we actually need from the market, right? And I think actually a good TA starts with actually a good process, right? So some people think TA is like an art, because it is people related and it's communication. But actually, I sort of see it as like a bit of a science as well, right? Like it's a bit nuanced, it's a bit of both. But I think it's like one is actually just having a strict process. So how are we actually rating the candidates? How are we scoring the candidates? What are the must-haves for the role? Where can we be flexible and actually defining that at the onset, right? Because I think we've all seen hiring processes where maybe we agreed beforehand about like, okay, this is the hiring criteria, and then all of a sudden towards the end, it's like, I don't know, the hiring manager like gets really excited about a particular candidate and then throws half of the criteria into the water,
Exactly.
But I think actually part of it is actually going back to, okay, well, what's the actual business problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a vacancy and it's like, okay, but why does that role exist? It's like, what problem are we trying to solve here? And then if we can concentrate on that and we can sort of dissect that and then hire against that, right? So I would say actually more standardization and actually more work up front into actually defining and aligning all the stakeholders on what's the problem that we're actually trying to solve and what are the skills that we need.
how to ensure within the process that the hiring managers are still following those metrics, those problems to be solved, rather than getting emotional about someone and saying like, yeah, I just want to hire that person, and just being completely blanco.
Yeah, so I think part of it that we were thinking about, although still needs to be widely adopted, but we started piloting, was just more like, you know, with different, that interview tools actually, like MetaView, right? Actually having a transcript of the interviews, so we can actually like see that what we actually agreed on assessing is actually being assessed in the call, right? So it's not just like, oh, hey, I had a good feeling about this person because we both like to play padel, you know? Or I find myself being able to have a beer with this guy, you know? Which, you know, also actually we see in interview processes as well. But I think part of it is, you know, once we have that transcript, we can actually say, okay, yeah, actually the hiring manager did go through all the things that they needed to go through, and there's some fidelity in what we're assessing, right? So I think that's sort of it's like holding everyone in the process accountable, right?
And is it an easy job for the recruiters?
No, I mean, recruitment is a hard job.
But from the side, it looks very easy for the people who doesn't understand maybe all the details, what recruiters are going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think from a hiring manager perspective, it's like a lot of times it's like, hey, if I can actually not deal with the recruiter, it's like, you know, if they could just provide me like candidates that I need to speak to, it's like, you know, that'll be great, right? But I think it's a lot more nuanced, right? And I think that's also the hallmark of a good recruiter, right? Because I think a good recruiter actually, the hiring manager, like, hey, I actually want to talk to this person because they're actually helping me inform my decision, right? And they actually challenge me into thinking about my role in a different way, and they give me some insights that I actually haven't really thought about, right? And I think that's where, as recruiters, it's like we can deliver more value, right? By providing our hiring managers with insights, because the hiring manager has another full-time job, right? And then this is our full-time job, is around hiring. So the more we can inform and actually give some confidence to our hiring managers that we're making the right hiring decision, yeah, I think that's our role to play.
Given the experience you have, but also you have an overview of the whole industry when it comes to recruitment, what type of recruiters are out there, what differentiates a really great recruiter from the average one?
Yeah, I think it's curiosity, actually. So I think a very good recruiter, they ask a lot of questions. They really want to know why. Like, okay, so why are we hiring this role? What does this person need to do? Why do we need them? Like, can we not have someone else in the company already, like, move into this role? Why does this vacancy actually exist, right? So I think it's a hard dynamic, right? Because also, generally speaking, the hiring managers that you're talking to, it's like they are senior, or they're maybe not the most senior leaders, but they are leaders in the company, right? Yeah. Because they are a manager. They are hiring people into their team, right? And as a recruiter, you know, you sort of have this power imbalance, right? So I think also good recruiters know how to sort of manage this dynamic, and even though someone that they're talking to might be a lot more senior than them, that they're still able to challenge their thoughts, not necessarily based on emotion, but just based on like, hey, have you thought about it in this perspective, right? Like if you base everything off of, you know, what you've seen or what you've read or what you've investigated about the market because of this curiosity. Yeah, I think that's what I look for when I look for a good recruiter, right? The converse of that is just someone who's like, okay, the hiring manager sent me a list and they're like, these people have to check these check boxes, and this person checks all the check boxes. And again, it's also a bit nuanced because it depends on the kind of recruitment that you're doing, right? So at Autodoc, for instance, you know, we have a lot of, well, we have senior hiring. We also have, you know, hiring of tech talent and engineers. But then we also have like customer service and warehouse hiring, right? And then I feel like, you know, it's not one size fits all, right? So given the context, it's like, the hiring also differs. So for instance, I think actually AI tools right now are very good for hiring for customer service roles and also warehouse kind of roles, because a lot of times it's just more like, can this person actually perform the tasks? And the tasks are very much, I guess, like set, right? And can they show up, And I think that's way easier to assess than maybe a lot more nuanced positions, right? Like, will this person make a good product owner or not?
I will touch maybe the perspective that you are coming actually to the TA, not from the TA, but from the software development.
Mm-hmm.
But again, maybe it's the fresh perspective you have, but what do you think that the whole industry is getting wrong? But at the same time, they think that this is the best practice.
The whole industry is getting wrong, but that it's best practice.
When it comes to recruitment.
I mean, I don't really think, I actually think recruitment processes, I've seen enough, also being on the agency side, that it's actually quite diverse. So I wouldn't really say everyone is getting wrong, right? I do think there is this bias towards wanting someone who has done the exact same role in the past, And that's something that, it's very hard to convince, because I also get it. Like, as a hiring manager, you want to reduce the risk of your next hire. It's very costly, right? So if you make a mishire, then you've wasted all this time interviewing this person. You have a vacancy that you actually couldn't get a person to actually fill. So there's also opportunity cost there. So you want to de-risk that hire as much as possible. But I also feel like if you just hire someone who is actually maybe okay with doing the same exact role that they've done for the past 5 years, that, it also depends on context, right? Like, if I have a financial controller, that person likes doing their job, then maybe that's good, right? But if you need like a product owner or someone a bit more innovative, then maybe that's not actually what you're getting, And so I think that's actually the hardest thing, because I do see a lot of times where the hiring manager comes and then they're like, hey, but this person hasn't done this role before, right? So I'm assuming some risk. And it's also trying to get the hiring managers comfortable with this risk, because maybe you're looking at this person's trajectory and you're like, hey, but they actually have all the applicable skills. Actually, if you look at your history, your career history, you weren't in this role.
Exactly, but they forgot.
When you started,
Yeah.
and maybe you can actually see like mirrors. So actually, like, what you're saying is like, okay, how can I tell if the next person can take the next step? Part of it is actually also going back maybe in history, and you can say, okay, hey, the people who are now heads of people or like chief people officers, these were the previous roles, right? And you can analyze that funnel. But I also think it's a bit more nuanced than just on these job titles and stuff, right? It's but it's a hard nut to crack.
But we should,
Yeah.
because that's going to help a lot to get to the right person faster. Okay, you mentioned the hiring managers, and that's actually made me a bit curious. Can you share maybe a great experience, a great example of the collaboration between the hiring manager and the recruitment team?
Yeah, I think good hiring managers, they're very invested in the recruitment process as well. They see it as like an important part of their job as a leader, right? To actually, hire, because you need good people on your teams. So usually the best hiring managers, they're very invested. They give us very clear criteria. They give us some time also to be able to set things up properly with them, right? So we're like, hey, this is how we're going to run the process. What are your thoughts? There's good back and forth. If we have any questions about problems and stuff, they're there, and then they'll help sort of guide the recruiters in terms of like, okay, hey, actually this person, I actually was thinking in this direction, but actually having interviewed people, I actually think maybe we need to move in this direction, and then this is why. So they give a bit more feedback, right? Because a lot of times also as a recruiter, you just get a no. And then you're like, okay, great, I got a no, but I actually don't know why the interviewer said no.
Exactly, no context.
And you don't have the context. So I think a good hiring manager, they're just invested in the process, because they also see it as a critical part of their jobs in building their teams.
As you're wrapping up your, or you already wrapped up, if I'm not mistaken, your assignment at Autodoc,
Yeah.
what would be one thing you would do differently in this job if you have a chance to go back in time?
Yeah, I think if I had a chance to go back in time, I think part of it would also probably be, very honestly, to be maybe a bit bolder. I think I joined also in a time where there was like a lot of changes to the team. I mean, it's also a company that, you know, it's still, even though it's a larger company, it still operates very much like a startup, right?
Yeah.
So I think part of it was also because of just changes in the organization. Sometimes not really, you know, thinking like, oh, well, maybe this thing needs to settle and stuff like that. And I feel like, yeah, maybe just sort of being bolder and taking steps. But I also wanted to make sure that it aligned with the changes in the broader organization, you know? But I think it's like I don't know. I feel like I know enough about like what a good process looks like to just have been like, hey guys, it's like this is what we're going to run. It's like, you know, it's like let's try this. Like, but I feel like maybe also because of the changes, I was actually trying to get the opinions of everyone. So I think maybe in hindsight, that's what I'd do a bit different.
Okay. Is it the thing you are taking to your next role? Being a bit bolder from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think I have enough. I think I have enough experience to sort of know what good looks like, and I think I tend to have the kind of personality where I also want to make sure that people on the team are invested, and you know, and that they feel good about the decision, right? But I think sometimes I might err a bit too much on that side.
Okay. I heard there are 44,000 recruiters in the Netherlands. And let's imagine even 1% is watching there now. And when it comes to the 1%, let's imagine that those are actually the young ones, yeah? They want to learn, they don't know what's going on with all the AI and things. What would be the piece of advice you can give to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just actually, like I said, it's like I think the hallmark of a good recruiter is being curious. And it's not just being like, okay, hey, these are the tasks that I'm given. So I think always the recruiters that have always impressed, well, I guess actually it's not really about impressing me, right? At the end of the day, it's about impressing the hiring manager. So the hiring manager comes to the head of TA and it's like, hey, this person's doing a great job. I want this person on all of my roles, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of that is actually just having this genuine curiosity about the business, but also the problems to be solved. So I think that's actually, I know the market dynamics are actually hard right now for recent graduates, but I think one good benefit is actually they're coming out of a context where, you know, they're studying, they're still curious, they're young, and I think, I think part of it is just like keeping that curiosity.
Okay. And what would be the piece of advice for the head of TAs out there who are struggling with everything, with all the changes and the transition from the classic approach to AI-driven approach within the function?
I guess I would say part of it is like we need to inform ourselves, right? Obviously, the whole job paradigm is shifting. Also, what you're seeing is even in terms of like, people are also not moving jobs as often as they used to be. Also, probably because of the market factors and stuff like that. So the whole recruitment environment has sort of shifted. So I think part of it is actually understanding what's happening overall. And I think part of it is, again, having the curiosity to test things. But then, again, it's like, it's also very easy to then just be like, okay, well, I'm going to outsource this whole process to AI and I don't even understand what my hiring process looks like, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, that's something that I would advise against. But yeah, I think part of it is like, there is a paradigm shift. So it's important for TA leaders to try to understand it, try to figure out what's going on. And then there are some very practical applications that you can already do in terms of your own organization, right? Even though that's not particularly sexy or sophisticated, but it's more like, okay, we know that LLMs are good at translation, you know? So we can do that with our job advertisements, reach a broader scope. You know, we can standardize our processes so our recruiters write in the same tone, in the same context. So, you know, so we professionalize our communications. These are not the things that will drive people to be like, wow, this is amazing, but those are some very good, like, concrete steps.
So, the game, rock, paper, scissors. You need to win 3 times, and if you're gonna win, then you will get the Avery branded merch. If I will win, then you support us. It can be piloting it in your new company, it can be support from the network you have.
Sounds good?
Okay, you count.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Oh, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Okay, you won. The hoodie will come. Thank you very much.
Nice.
I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you did too. Thank you for watching.